Hello ladies and gentlemen, this is Blue Maxima, and I want to talk to you for a little bit about Halo Fireteam Raven, which is an arcade game. So it's a little bit interesting to try and get footage of anything, but I will also point out that this isn't actually my footage. This is from a guy named Karz's Shooting Games on YouTube. And I just took his footage, I've scaled it up a little bit, and I've cut it down a little bit so that you're not seeing the entire game in one video. So I will leave the link to the exact video in the YouTube description, because this is honestly the best footage of the game I could get. Obviously, I'm not allowed to film inside an arcade, which is going to suck because they've got a proper Tyco no touch machine there, and I'd love to record myself playing that, but there's not a chance that's going to happen. But also, notably, most of the versions of Fireteam Raven are actually 4 players, where they've got like 2 huge screens and 4 guns. This is the only footage I could find that actually had the 2 guns in there, which is the version that I was playing, so duly noted. Just all those things I should probably tell you before we actually get into the game itself, because honestly the game itself is actually really simple, almost to the point of not really feeling that much like Halo. It's got the graphical side of things, I can tell you that much. Now, this is a very shaky cam and kind of blurry sort of view of the game, but it is relatively representative and it's very clear, very sharp. All the effects look great. The animations are fantastic. It is a very good looking game, but that's about where the things that relate this game to Halo really end, because there's a lot of things that they've changed up in order to turn this more into a traditional light gun shooter versus a traditional Halo game. For example, the weapons that you get this big gun that looks like a Warthog chain gun, like physically, that you point around the screen to shoot at things. But half the time you're not actually on the back of a chain gun. It makes sense when you are. Like, it makes perfect sense that it works the way that it does when you're on the back actually shooting at things. However, it's also worth noting that half the time you'll be using proper Halo weapons. You'll be using the assault rifle, you'll be using the plasma rifle, both pistol types. This is taking place during the story of Halo 1, by the way, so there's nothing too over the top in relation to that. And you'll be using these weapons just in the same way, pointing them with this massive chain gun and shooting them and reloading when your ammo runs dry by pressing a big fat button on the middle of the gun itself. And this would be okay if it actually, like, paid attention to just Halo's or things that they have already set up, like energy weapons doing more damage to shields and then physical weapons doing more damage to health. But because you can only carry one weapon at a time in this game, it all does the same amount of damage, and so every gun ends up feeling the same. The only guns that really feel different are stuff like the pistols, which are semi-automatic, but really you're just pulling the triggers as fast as possible in that case, and therefore you're doing about the same amount of damage over the same amount of time if you do that. But you've also got things like the shotgun, but the shotgun is just like, pull it as fast as you can. There's no fire rate limit. It acts like a pistol for some reason. So all of the guns tend to feel the same most of the time, and it doesn't really, it isn't really that satisfying, if I'm being honest with you, especially since everything seems to take the same amount of damage from the same weaponry in the same positions if you're firing and whatnot. There's like 1 or 2 exceptions that come up rarely, like, for example, you've got the Phantoms that are flying over. Shoot them in the right place and they'll explode a little bit faster, and you do have the ability to shoot around the shields of the buggers that have the shields, the Jackals. Couldn't remember the name of them for a second there. But yeah, otherwise it just feels like a really standard light gun game where you just point the gun at a target and shoot the enemies. You also get a limited amount of grenades that you can use to instantly kill basically anything, but here's the thing about the way this game works. Enemies will swarm in on both sides of the screen, and there's a very obvious divide down the middle where they're making up for the fact that there's 2 players and you need to worry about both players having enemies on both sides of their screen at once. And you can cross over to help the other player take something out before they lose health, but the game is very clearly balanced around the idea of losing as much health as possible in order to put in more quarters, because this is a quarter muncher. Make no doubt about it. There are very few situations where you'll be playing through this game the first time that you'll be able to avoid damage, because all of the enemies will come up and they'll start shooting you basically randomly. Sometimes you'll be able to guess which ones are going to shoot at you first, but this isn't like Halo, where you need to do proper, like, target danger. What's the word I'm looking for? Proper target recognition, where you got to take out the elites first and then take out the grunts as they're running away. No, they'll randomly shoot. They'll all come on up, and then one of them will start randomly shooting, and then another one will randomly shoot, and then another one will randomly shoot. And there's no way to tell just by looking at them. So it really does just feel like there's nothing that makes Halo really comes through in this game that isn't a theme. Because they'll just rock up, you'll shoot them, one of them will probably get a shot back on you, rinse and repeat over multiple locations and engagements and weapon types, and it doesn't feel great. It really doesn't feel great. It's just not interesting. There's very little in the way of fancy tactics. There's no power-ups. There's no fancy extra targets that you can shoot for more points, more kills, more damage, or what have you. Sometimes you will pass over the top of a bunch of enemies that you can shoot that aren't actually any threat to you for bonus kills, and there is a score at the end of the game, but just outside of that, there's just nothing to it. Nothing in the way of properly choosing your targets, actually aiming your gun outside of just aiming at center mass, or just anything that would make the game's shooting actually interesting, outside of the fact that you might need to slap the reload button a couple of times. And of course, it's a quarter muncher, so you'll spend an absolute ton of time adding in like a bunch of credits on it with the start button in order to actually play through the entire game. I didn't play through the entire game. I played through like the first 5 missions, but trust me, nothing really changes between Mission 1 and Mission 5. They do introduce the Flood, and oddly enough, both the Flood and the Covenant hate you, but don't hate each other, which isn't even accurate in-game lore. Even the Covenant were like, "Ah, crap, this is going to be worse than we thought. We need to stop this stuff." But no, you'll literally have scenes in the game where they'll come up on you, like, in pairs, and you'll have to shoot both of them while they're both shooting at you, and they won't give a damn about each other, and it's so weird. Not to mention a couple of other things that are weird as well, like you end up on Forge Island from Halo Reach in this game for some reason. I don't know what that's about. I think there's a couple of other multiplayer maps spread in there as well. The Master Chief makes a couple of appearances, roughly where he's supposed to, so that's not too far out of whack, I suppose. But, you know, it's Master Chief. They've made him more and more and more badass to the point of absolute insanity in the recent point of these games, you know? So, it's not particularly great. And of course, the game's got no replay value because it's the same engagements, there's no difficulties, there's no branching paths, and of course, it costs a lot of money to get through it. The only reason I ended up playing through as much of this game as I did was because the Australian government was giving us what they call Dine and Discover vouchers, where they were trying to convince people to get back out and actually giving money to businesses after the coronavirus. So that's the only reason I was able to play through as much of this game as I did. Otherwise, I would have ended up paying like $30 in real-world money, and no, not for this. And you do have the opportunity to bring along a second player, of course, but if you don't bring along that second player, they'll mostly just be inhabited by like some boring AI that just sometimes shoots at other things. That's a sneeze. So they'll just end up like shooting at another enemy that's on screen, usually on their side of the screen, but they might help you out from time to time. But of course there are areas where this simply won't help, so you'll end up doing something like trying to focus down. So there'll be points where you'll want to focus down an enemy on your side of the screen so they won't hit you, and the AI isn't smart enough to know to do that. But then of course when you've got two players going after their own targets and you don't know which one is going to shoot first, it just recreates this problem. And so, as a result, it's just not that fun. If it was like, you know, you pay $5, you get 45 minutes, which is roughly the length of the game, you get a 45-minute Halo experience that's just spectacle, things blowing up, and having a bunch of different weapons to use from time to time to time, that would actually be fine. But the game is so much of a quarter muncher that it is incredibly hard to recommend that you bother to seek this out and play it, just because it's going to take so much of your money for something that's so insubstantial. The weapons don't feel any different from each other. It breaks some of Halo's rules. Like, here's another rule that it breaks. You know how in Halo, well, in any Halo really, where there's Flood, where all the little ones will gather together and one shot will take them all out? Not in this game. You have to use 2 shots on each of them, and they're really bloody annoying. But, yeah, it's just so insubstantial. There's no branching paths, there's no difficulty. The enemy layout is designed to make you take as much damage as possible. There's nothing in the way of just changing weapons or target adjustment or anything along those lines to make this actually enjoyable. And as a result, well, enjoyable on a deeper level than just things blowing up. And so as a result, yeah, don't bother. If you see this in an arcade, don't bother. Go watch like a YouTube playthrough of the game, and you'll probably have an absolutely, like, not so much representative, but it'll be fine. It'll show you everything the game's got to offer, and that'll be the long and the short of it. With that said, this has been Blue Maxima. I'll see you all next time.
Assault.